Can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Um, my name is Sophia Dugbarty Hodenu. As Macy stated, I am the Education Abroad Financial Aid Specialist. So I'm going to do a brief presentation regarding the FAFSA application process, and what is needed to complete the application. So as I go through the presentation, if you do have questions, if you could please hold it until the end of the presentation, and then I can go through the questions that you may or may not have, okay? All right, so FAFSA 101, what we'll be going over today will be general FAFSA questions. I'm so sorry, my thing isn't working. Give me 1 second, please. I'm so sorry. Let's try this again. Here we go. Okay, so our overview for today, we are going to determine what a FAFSA is. Why do I need a FAFSA? What information / documentation do I need to submit a FAFSA? And then important dates and deadlines for the application. So what is a FAFSA? A FAFSA is the first step in the financial aid process. It is called the free application for federal student aid. So I do want to emphasize the word free. If you are ever completing an application and they are requesting a payment from you, you're not actually completing your application on the FAFSA website. You want to always make sure to go to the FAFSA website. There are no third parties involved, and there is no fee or cost to complete a FAFSA application. So submitting a FAFSA application allows us to be able to review the information that typically comes back within 3 business days to determine financial aid eligibility for those students who do submit the application. Um, why do I need a FAFSA? A FAFSA is required in order to determine a student's eligibility for federal and state financial aid. Now, financial aid does consist primarily of federal grants and loans, and without a valid FAFSA, financial aid eligibility cannot be determined. So if you are looking to get a program funded or just looking to go to school in general to see what you qualify for in financial aid, we do need to have a FAFSA on file so that the information that comes from the application can be reviewed, and then we are able to let you know what you could be eligible for in aid. Now, the different types of aid are federal loans, the federal direct subsidized or unsubsidized loan. Those are loans. They do have to be repaid. They're funded through the Department of Education. The loans don't go into repayment until 6 months after your last day of attending classes. And then there's also the federal Pell Grant, which is gift aid that is determined from a FAFSA application, as well as the state grant, which is the California grant for California residents. So the FAFSA is kind of the umbrella to determine eligibility for the additional aid that students might qualify for. Okay. So when you are going to complete an application, what information or documentation do I need to submit a FAFSA? So the first bit of information that you'll need, of course, will be the FAFSA website. So you can go to this website here, and feel free if you would like to take a picture of this screen. This will give you the information that you need to be able to access the FAFSA website. Once you access the FAFSA website, which is fafsa.gov, you are going to need your FSA user ID and password. Now, students, as well as parents, if you are a dependent student, you will have separate FSA user IDs. So when you're submitting your FAFSA application, when you log in as a student, you will begin the application process. And then as you proceed through the application, there are specific questions that are asked to determine the dependency status for students. So based on that information, it will either request parent information or not request parent information. If parent information is requested, your parent, either mom or dad, will need to create their own FSA user ID and password in order to access the application, to provide their information, and also be able to sign the application electronically. Okay. Another important note is the school code for UCR. The school code is 001316. When submitting your FAFSA, you can submit up to 10 school codes. The information for your FAFSA application will go to each of the schools that are listed, but only the school that you'll be attending will process financial aid for you. Okay. The other documentation that is needed to submit an application are the the taxes for the specific award year. So for the 2021-2022 FAFSA award year, 2019 federal taxes will be needed to complete that application. And then for the 2022-2023 FAFSA award year, 2020 tax information will be required for that application. So when the FAFSA application comes around, so every year the FAFSA renewal process happens. In October 1st is when the new FAFSA applications are available to begin submitting for the upcoming academic year. Students are always notified that the renewal process is coming up. When you are submitting your FAFSA application, one tool that I do recommend that everyone use is the IRS data retrieval tool. Now, it does ask you specifically if you want to use the data retrieval tool. You can answer no. However, in some cases, there may be additional information that is requested. Using the IRS data retrieval tool ensures that the information that's being asked on the FAFSA is accurately pulled from your actual tax return to the FAFSA application. So it's a really simple step. It's a really simple process. You simply click that link. It'll take you to the IRS website where you will have to plug in your address and your name exactly as it appears on the taxes. So for instance, if the tax preparer typed your name in all capital letters, to access the information on the IRS website, you have to type your name in all capital letters on the website. So at any point when you're looking to submit a FAFSA application, if you get stuck or you do have questions, you can contact the financial aid department. You can contact me in the financial aid department. If we need to set up an appointment, I can set up an appointment to walk you through that process. That way we can get your information back as quickly as possible with the least amount of errors so that additional documentation does not have to be submitted. In some cases, when an application is processed, it can be selected for a process called verification. And if you are selected for verification, just know that you didn't do anything wrong on the application. It's just system generated. So the applications are selected just to confirm that the tax information being reported on the application has been reported accurately because, like I said earlier, the FAFSA application is used to determine grant aid. So if you are eligible for grant aid, which is gift aid that does not have to be repaid, we definitely want to make sure that we are going to be able to award you the maximum in that grant aid that you are eligible for. Okay. Now, important dates and deadlines to remember concerning the FAFSA application. So like I said previously, FAFSA renewal occurs October 1st of every year. So October 1st of every year, you are going to receive a notification that your FAFSA application is open and ready for submission. You want to complete your FAFSA if you can as early as possible. Of course, um, in some instances, tax information may not have been completed yet. If that is the case, you can use your income information from your W-2s to get your application processed. But once your taxes have actually been filed, then you'll want to go back to make the updates to the tax portion of the application. Now, the critical deadline here is this one here. The Fafsa deadline is March 2nd. So you need to make sure that you have completed and submitted your application on or before March 2nd. 11:59 is the deadline, but I don't even want you to run it that close. For a level of comfort, I'd say get it done by March 1st. March 2nd, there could be a big influx of students trying to get their applications submitted. If your application is not submitted by the March 2nd deadline, it will not be reviewed to determine state grant eligibility, which is the California grant, or Cal Grant for short. So just make sure that you complete the application by March 1st, just to give yourself some breathing room, because there have been instances where the Fafsa website has gone down because so many applicants are trying to get on there and submit their information. So to not run into that situation, I would just suggest to try to get it done by March 1st and not wait until March 2nd. Okay. So that concludes the presentation portion of the Fafsa 101. I will now open it up for any questions that you may have. And then I can hand it back over to Macy to close us out if we don't have very many questions. So let me stop sharing for just a moment.
Thank you, Sophia. We have one question coming from Eric Yang. Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, Sophia. Thank you so much for doing this presentation. I have a quick question. So I remember when I was a student, when I was doing some sort of financial aid, this is what I heard. I don't know if this is true. I hope you can dispel some misconception.
Okay.
If you were picked or chosen to provide more documentation, would it, so for a following year, are you more likely to be chosen again, or how does that work? Is it like, that's what I heard. I've never got personally chosen to provide more financial aid, more documentation, but I know there's somebody who did, and they were chosen again next year, and that was what they said, but I don't know if that's true or not.
So it is true that students can be selected for the verification process. It is a random selection. So in some cases, a student could be selected for verification for the 2021-2022 academic year. And then when you submit your 2022-23 Fafsa application, you may not be selected. So it's pretty random, but there are instances where some students are selected for multiple years. So it's not that they're doing anything wrong, it's system generated. So when you are submitting your Fafsa application, you do want to ensure that you provide the most accurate information the first time around, if you can, of course. If you're going back and forth making changes or updates, the Fafsa Processing Center, they can flag your application. And in flagging your application, they can request additional documentation just to ensure that the information that's being reported is reported accurately. The Fafsa is a legal and binding document. So the information has to be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. And like I said, in some cases, if the taxes are not done, that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and use your W-2 to report the income that you earned. And then all the other areas like the income taxes paid, dependents and things of that nature, once your taxes are actually filed, you can go back to make that update or correction to your Fafsa. So that was a great question, Eric.
I have a question from Angelina, and I think I can handle that one, Sophia, if you don't mind. Her question is, can you get financial aid for studying abroad? And the answer is yes, financial aid applies to learning abroad, no matter if you're doing UCEAP OAP, FLEEP, you're still a UCR student when you engage in these programs. So no matter what you're doing at UCR, if you're an enrolled UCR student and you need financial aid, you need to make sure you're renewing your FAFSA and following all the steps so that you can get some money from the federal and state governments to help you, right? So, and that also applies to programs that have an internship component where you're getting academic credit for the internship. So financial aid also applies. So any program where you're getting academic credit, it's tied to financial aid and therefore financial aid applies. Okay, I hope that helps, Angelina. Next question is from Ronaldo. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, my question is actually related to that. So because last year I took some summer courses here at UCR, and one of the requirements to receive like some financial aid was to take a minimum number of units or a certain number of units. In the case of an internship, are we also required to take a number of units, because internships also give some units?
So Ronaldo, you're doing a UCAP program. So as long as you're following the minimum enrollment requirements, whatever units that is required of you to be enrolled in for that program, you will satisfy the requirement to receive financial aid. So you'll need to look closely at the details for your program in your UCEAP program page on this. And it varies from program to program, but as long as you do not go below the minimum, you should be fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ronaldo. Often is a question from students, can they use their veteran benefits for studying abroad?
Stacy,
Sophia.
before you answered that, because someone connected a thing for the 6 units. So on OAP, you can receive part-time aid for programs with academic credit from 6 to 11 units. And you may be able to receive full-time aid for programs that are 12 or more units. And if I am wrong, Sophia can correct me.
That was absolutely correct, LaSharon.
So as long as you're receiving 6 or more units, you may be able to use eligible aid.
Correct.
Thank you, LaSharon. It's always good to just ask the question. So if you're ever unsure, please do reach out to Sophia. And I want to reiterate what Sophia mentioned in the chat. If you're trying to learn abroad or have plans to, you do not need to report that in your FAFSA. Again, you are a UCR student participating on these programs. FAFSA doesn't care if you're going abroad or not. They only care that you're enrolled at your main institution, which is UCR, hence the institution code that Sophia provided you. Thank you, Sharon and Sophia. So Sophia, can students use veteran benefits for studying abroad?
Unfortunately, not at this time. It's a question that's been going back for a little while, from what I have heard, and they haven't come to a final conclusion just yet. So if and when that does become available, students will be notified. I'll also circle back because we have brought it up a couple months ago, and they were still discussing it. So I'll see if there's an update. Fingers crossed, hopefully they can, because that would be a beautiful benefit for students who are eligible to be able to utilize to study abroad. But as of right now, that's a no.
And can you clarify, Sophia, can it be used towards just UCR related fees? So for example, tuition, UC tuition, can the veteran benefits be applied to UC tuition?
UC tuition, if it's not a study abroad program,
I see.
yes, you can utilize the benefit.
Thank you for clarifying, because
Sure.
I know there have been confusion in the past that the veterans benefits cannot be applied to study abroad related fees, but it can be applied to UCR related fees. But if a student is doing an education abroad program, it doesn't matter at all at that point. It would not be applicable. Thank you.
Correct, right.
We have a question. How does receiving a scholarship affect students' financial aid. And we do encourage you all to research and apply for scholarships. But what if a student gets like the Gilman or the Freeman Asia? What happens to their existing financial aid?
You're still eligible for the financial aid. We just have to review to ensure that you're not exceeding the cost of attendance for the actual program. If that occurs, we would have to adjust the federal aid portion, but we would notify you to go over that information with you and to ensure that you're okay. So we want you to maximize all of your gift aid because you don't have to pay it back. So if a student has received scholarships and is also receiving federal loans, we will always look out for the student's best interest. So we'll decrease the federal loans because that is a loan that does have to be repaid. So leaving school with the least amount of debt is always the goal. So your financial aid will be adjusted if it's exceeding the cost of attendance, and then you'll be notified if there are any changes of that sort.
Thank you, Sophia.
You're welcome.
Another question coming from Brian. If we were to take another class in my program, would I qualify for more financial aid? I am currently enrolled in 10 units. Let me try to answer that one because it's related to more the education abroad programming. So you're paying a one lump sum that as long as you are taking classes above the minimum that's required for your program, Brian, your financial aid is going to be packaged according to that lump sum of the program cost for your education abroad program. I hope that makes sense. So again, I stress to students, please understand what the minimum course units that are required for your program. If you go below that, it will impact your financial aid. But if you go above it, that's great. You're gonna be fine. But please understand what it means to be a full-time student under your program because it does vary from program to program.
Okay.
Sophia, anything else to add to that?
That's perfect. That's actually it. I was just gonna talk back on that is that depending on the number of units that would satisfy a full-time status versus a half-time or even a 3/4 time status, that's how your aid will be packaged. So as Macy mentioned, just be sure to review what the full-time unit requirement is for the program that you'll be attending. And so long as you meet that, then you'll be awarded the maximum aid based on that information.
I hope that it helps to answer your question, Brian. Yes, anything else to add, Brian?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure. So my program just said that what's the one in Italy? I spoke to Sophia and you as well, actually. I just wanted to confirm I'm taking 2 Italian courses, which goes up to 10 units.
Mm-hmm.
So, and after that, you said that I'm meeting the requirements, right? So I'm good to go from there.
Yes.
Okay. So if I added anything more, would I qualify more for financial aid, or was it just?
No, you would not. Again, your program costs are fixed.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Brian. All right, another question from Rachel, a very common one. As UCR is a quarter system, if students are attending semester-long programs, how does that change their financial aid?
So it doesn't change their financial aid per se. So your financial aid is packaged based on the semester that you'll be attending, but it does cross over into, let's say, a spring quarter here at UCR. So if you're starting a spring semester abroad program, it's going to cross over for, it's too much for me to get into because it'll confuse the student. But basically, you're crossing over here at UCR, but you're only going to be awarded an aid based on that semester. So your maximum aid eligibility for the semester that you'll be abroad will be updated based on the start of that program and where it falls into the fall, winter, or spring session. Or excuse me, quarter at UCR. So
Mhm.
it isn't something that a student would have to monitor for themselves. We take care of the packaging and then we get the aid dispersed for you.
Mhm.
So you don't have to necessarily track that information or have
Mhm.
to wait for aid to post before you can
Mhm.
take action.
Mhm. Thank you, Sophia. And this generally applies to what she said, students who are doing full spring semester programs. Most institutions outside of UCR are on a semester system. So we're the weird ones. Those institutions have only a fall semester or a spring semester program. And often those run longer than our quarter program or a quarter term, right? And so what that ultimately means for you is you're going to see a higher financial aid package for your semester program as opposed to your quarter long term at UCR. I
That
hope
is
that,
correct.
yeah.
That's accurate.
Thank you, Sophia. I hope that answers your question, Rachel. And LaSharon, anything else to add?
I want to ask the question that kind of often connects to this, and it's especially specific to OAP programs. Student will take a summer program, but that summer program starts during UCR's spring quarter. How is aid then packaged when it starts in our spring quarter, but then also goes into the summer?
It is packaged based on the summer start, from my understanding. So for the OAP summer programs, the aid would be limited, just based on the number of units that the student is going to be taking and the length of the program. But what I'll do to get a clearer understanding and explanation for you, I will circle back with Nino
Okay.
just to reconfirm that, to ensure that I'm providing the correct information. But to my understanding, the OAP or summer sessions, the aid is limited because it's prorated based on the number of units that a student would be taking for that particular term.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sophia. Another question that often comes up from students is, how will I know how much financial aid I might expect to receive for my program? Let's say if I'm going this summer or next fall or next academic year. Obviously, that information is not available yet. What can they do in the meantime to just help them prepare mentally on what their financial aid package could be?
So it's kind of hard to project
Right.
the eligibility for financial aid. It will remain the same. It will look different for each student though.
Of course.
So essentially, if it's a full-time program, then the aid that you typically would be eligible for a quarter at UCR is what you could possibly anticipate receiving for that semester abroad. So the numbers are going to vary. You can always reach out or go to the UCEAP website to schedule an appointment where we can kind of go over an estimate of what that would look like for a student. Just because the numbers vary, and then sometimes the program cost could change after an estimate has been given. So there's different caveats, but the aid that you're eligible for, you will be packaged at the maximum that you're eligible for any of the programs that you decide to go into. So we kind of get in the weeds because it's different for every student. So scheduling an appointment to go over that particular portion or any other questions or concerns that a student may have would be best. That way, they can, because I know for me, like if I'm in a big group setting, there's some questions that I don't want to ask in a group
Right.
setting versus asking in a personal setting. And you know, it's so whatever's convenient for the student,
Mhm.
we will definitely do. But that's why those appointments are available to you all, is to go into specifics about
Mhm.
your specific program of
Mhm.
interest, what your aid will look like, what alternatives may be available for you, and things of that nature.
Thank you, Sophia. Yes, a very good reminder that you can, it varies tremendously from student to student, from program to program. So if you want to speak more in specifics with Sophia, as she said, log into My UCR Abroad under appointments, and you can make an appointment with her and or send her a direct email. And there was another point I was going to make. But yes, there's a lot of uncertainty until your 22-23 FAFSA is reviewed by the financial aid team. So in the meantime, you have access to information already about your financial aid eligibility by looking at what's already been given to you in the past. In your RWeb, you can log on and see what has been traditionally given to you to give you a sense of what to expect for the 22-23 school year, which again, by the way, begins with summer 22. A lot of students forget that fact. The new academic year and the new financial aid year begins with summer 22. So that's important to take note of. Another commonly asked question, Sophia, is when should I expect to receive my financial aid for, let's say a student's going on a summer 22 program? When should they expect to see their financial aid package for that term?
So your packaging information, your funding will be updated, and you'll receive an email notification that your aid has been packaged. So you'll be able to log into your account to view that information. And then as far as aid being dispersed, aid is typically dispersed 10 days prior to the start of the program.
Mhm.
So long as you have completed everything that you need and you've gone in to accept the aid that you would like to have applied towards your program, then there shouldn't be any hiccups. Your aid will be dispersed to you, and then any refunds that you're going to receive will be sent via direct deposit. We strongly encourage direct deposit. If for whatever reason you do not have direct deposit set up, then a paper check will be mailed to the address that is on file for you. So you see where the conflict can come. If you're abroad and we have to mail a check to your home, you're not going to have the funds that you need to cover whatever expenses you have. So we strongly recommend to go ahead and set up direct deposit. That way everything is done electronically for you. You'll get your funding, and you'll be able to take care of what you need to take care of, and not have to stress over that piece, and be able to enjoy your study abroad experience.
Thank you, Sophia. So to summarize, students will see a disbursement of their financial aid, no matter what term you're going on, students, roughly 10 days before the start of your program. And you'll get to review what that package is, just as you normally would. You know, you can accept, decline, whatever. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, Sophia, does that happen like 3 to 5 weeks or so before the student starts their program? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a process, everyone. It's a process that requires multiple people to pay attention and work together, and especially you students paying attention to your emails from the financial aid office, because any delays in your financial aid is going to delay everything else, the disbursement, your refunds, all of it. So making sure that you're regularly keeping track of your emails sent to your UCR account.
Yes, your UCR email.
Yes, UCR email. That is the official way
Mhm.
we are all communicating with you. Even if you're, even if you need to forward emails from your UCR account to your whatever other email account, do that. But know that we are exclusively communicating to you only through your UCR email address.
Yes.
Any other questions from students, LaSharon?
Yes, I'm going to answer one that Rachel asked about. Do we pay for UCR or are we just paying for our abroad program? I'm going to answer this program by program because the answer will be different. For the FLEEP program, you're paying UCR because basically FLEEP is a summer session program. So you're going to play UCR directly. For UCAP, you're just paying for UCAP program fees. However, you will also be paying directly to UCR if you have ship insurance, that will be the one fee that gets paid to UCR. But all the other fees will just be paid directly to UCAP. For OAP, you're just paying your program provider. However, if you're going abroad during the normal academic year, the one fee that you do pay to UCR is for your planned opportunity abroad agreement, which is a leave of absence. So technically, you're not paying any tuition on UCAP or OAP to UCR. It's really going to go out to your programs. So hopefully, Rachel, that answered that question. And then another question that was asked is, how do we make appointments for scholarships? Do we make it directly to the staff or do we use another website? So with that one, we use My Ucr Abroad. So many of you should know how to get to My Ucr Abroad. So if you need to make an appointment for either myself, Macy, and even Sophia, you make it through the My Ucr Abroad portal. If you have questions directly about scholarships, if say you've already attended the scholarship workshop that Macy tends to hold every Thursday, you can make an appointment just with either her or myself for that. So My Ucr Abroad is our appointment system. I have a question, Sophia, that is related to undocumented students. Now with advanced parole being back and students with DACA being able to go abroad, how is financial aid affected for students that are within this type of status?
For the DACA status, so I have not dealt with a DACA status situation just yet. So I would definitely have to reach out to Nino to get additional information for you, which I can circle back to you by tomorrow. From my understanding, I don't know that they would be eligible for federal aid. But they would be eligible for grant aid. The amount, of course, I believe would be contingent on the number of units and then the length of the program that they'll be attending. But I'll get more clarity on that and I will send a follow-up email to you to confirm the information.
So in any of you with DACA status, I will provide that information to undocumented student programs and you can reach out to them for any additional information regarding that. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Sophia, are there any other resources, tools, workshops that is offered through the financial aid office that you can help remind students that are there and are available? I know that you guys have like a wellness, financial wellness wing in your office or advisor. Just overall, just other resources that can help students to build on their financial literacy skills and consider loan and not be so scared of loans, for example, information sessions, additional things related to finances that can help build students' confidence.
Right. We are actually working on that. If a student is hesitant or has questions or is feeling some type of way, they can always reach out to me. The study abroad students, or I mean, just students in general. That's what I'm there for. They can call into the financial aid office to also ask general questions like that. But for the study abroad population, you can always reach out to me direct via email. If you call the financial aid office, I can talk to you over the phone. We can set up an appointment. Financial aid is scary. I'm not even going to try to dance around that. It can be very scary, especially for first-time students or just first-time borrowers, because there are so many different options that are available. And you do have to make sure that you have a good, firm understanding of what that process is. So just as a general rule, anything that is a loan is money that's being lent to you. So it does require repayment. Now, when the repayment occurs for the federal loans, the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, that repayment will occur 6 months after a student's last day of attending. So you graduate in February, 6 months from there, you're going to start receiving notices from your lender that your federal loans are going to go into repayment. This is the overall total for the entire duration of time that you've been attending school. This is what your monthly payment amount is going to be. Now, there's so many different caveats. You know, most of the time, most students are not working full time just yet after that 6 month grace period. So if that is the situation, there are several different options that all the various lenders have to work with students to ease them into the repayment process. So it's just understanding that a loan is money that is lent to you for a period of time that does require repayment. A grant of any sort is gift aid. That is money that does not have to be repaid. Scholarships also are gift aid that do not have to be repaid. So at all costs, you know, if you are able to apply for multiple scholarships during the entire time that you're attending school, if you end up qualifying for enough scholarships for us to return money back on your loans, we can definitely do that to reduce your overall loan debt. So the objective for any student, in my eyes, is to always leave school with the least amount of loan debt. It is a debt. You're investing in yourself by way of utilizing federal loans if you need them. If you don't need them, don't take them out. um, you know, if you have enough in your grant aid and scholarships to cover your costs, then that's all that you need. But loans are something that they do have to be paid back. There are steps that you have to take before loans can be dispersed as well. They require a master promissory note, which is essentially your knowledge and acknowledgement that you are aware these are loans. These are loans that do have to be repaid, but they will be repaid 6 months after a student's last date of attendance. So if you graduate from school, 6 months goes by, your loan goes into repayment, and you end up going back to school, you can always contact your lender to let them know, I'm back in school. They will then have you fill out a deferment request form to request that they not bill you for the loans that you took out at UCR until you complete 6 months after you complete your next program. So deferment is an option. Deferment does happen with your regular federal loans while you're in school. It's just on the unsubsidized loan, you have the option to make interest payments while you're in school, but it's not actually required. So that's the difference between the loans. So those types of questions, like I really like to sit down and explain that to students because that gets foggy, that can be confusing. So any type of questions that you have regarding financial aid, you definitely can always contact the financial aid office, or you can just reach out to me specifically for the study abroad population. But we are working to build a better financial awareness for all students. And then just also try to create information that's readily available for students that do have questions like that.
Thank you, Sophia, so much for touching on loans. I know our demographic of students, myself included, I was a UCR student. I was deathly afraid of loans, but now as an adult, many moons later, I recognize that they're there to help you. It is an investment in yourself, only if you need it, as Sophia said. Thank you, Sophia. And last question from Brian here. So what Sophia was referring to, that 6 months, that 6-month timeline, that happens after you graduate, right? We're assuming that you are learning abroad before you graduate, obviously. And so that the clock starts ticking once you graduate from UCR and when you need to start making payments back towards that loan, unless you need to defer it, but that's generally the case.
That's right.
Any other questions? These are very, very good questions and conversations we're having here about financial aid.
I don't have a question, but I have a clarification. I know the answer, but I'm asking this only for the fact we are recording.
No
There's
problem.
often a misconception that financial aid will only cover the tuition for study abroad programs. Can you elaborate on when you're packaging a student for an abroad program, what is taken into consideration? And either Sophia or Macy, you can answer.
So when packaging a student that is going to be studying abroad, we will package them to the maximum of their eligibility. So if the aid that they are eligible for exceeds what they need to cover their costs abroad, it would create a refund that would be generated and issued to the student. So this is where, when the packaging is complete, the student can go in to accept or decline the aid that they do or do not want to take out. So if there is excess, it can be issued as a refund. Any aid that a student is eligible for. So if it's only grant aid that a student, is going to accept and it exceeds what they need to cover their study abroad tuition costs, then there's no repayment of anything because there weren't any loans associated with that. If there are federal loans that are included in that, that loan piece will have to be repaid, but again, not until 6 months after the last day of attendance for a student.
Question from Ronaldo, go ahead.
Hi. Oh, thank you for the information. I actually have a question regarding the budget. Like, I would like to know if, like, I understand that for example, the UC website provides you with an estimate of the expenses of the budget you should actually expect. But shall we like add a error percentage to that budget? Like, for example, some extra money in case of an emergency, or like some less money, or how will that be? Should we expect like a little bit numbers a little bit different?
That's a good question, Ronaldo. All students, no matter what program you're doing, we expect you to, on your own, perform your own personal budgeting, because that is it varies so much between students. You could be a frugal spender, you could be a spender. So anything outside of what the program costs stated for your program, any personal costs that you think you might be incurring while you're on your program, you would need to figure that out on your own. There's a lot of worksheets that can help you if you just Google. Or Sophia, do you have a budgeting worksheet that students can have access to, like a template that's offered through financial aid?
I don't know that we have one. I will check. And then if we do, I can get that to you guys, you and LaSharon to disperse to the study abroad
Yeah.
students. If we don't have one, I will try to get together with Nino to see if we can create something for the students to have.
Okay, thank you. But in the meantime, you know, it's a personal thing, right? Your own personal expenses on what you think you might be spending abroad. So we always encourage students to think about an emergency fund while you're abroad, just in case for emergencies, right? But in life in general, you should have some kind of like a savings account, emergency fund for unexpected costs that may arise. Yeah, thinking hard about, you know, what are those extra costs that you think you might be incurring if you were to travel outside, you know, in addition to your program, you know, you might be traveling to other places that you want to go see, for example, souvenirs, extra meals, etc. How much do you think you would be spending? It's really hard to say. So I'm not sure if that helped you with your question, Ronaldo.
It was very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Nancy, I'm going to add on to that question as well. So for those who are looking at UCAP, when you're looking at the budget that's on their website, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Now, for students who are doing OAP, when you're looking at your program website may not include housing. It may not include airfare, all of these additional expense. However, when you're working with me on an OAP program, when I'm doing your cost estimate with your program, they're adding those expenses off. So what you see on your program website will not necessarily be your final budget, because I'm asking them to give me what your additional, what we call quote unquote, real cost will be for your program. So I usually tell a student, whatever you see on your program website, add about 5,000 to 6,000 to your program cost, because we want to think bigger picture, because oftentimes students are not like thinking, oh, I still got to get there. Oh, my program didn't cover housing or food or all these other things.
Right. So if learning abroad is in your future, you definitely want to save now from existing financial aid, savings, crowdfunding, other sources of funds. Students are very creative with crowdfunding, for example. If you don't know what that means, Google it. It's a very creative way that people in general have been raising money for causes, right? And what better cause for you all than to internationalize your fields, right? So with 4 minutes on the clock, I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind students that there is a Education Abroad Scholarships Workshop happening virtually from 2 to 3 today. You can sign up in My Ucr Abroad under events. I will be hosting that. We'll talk about scholarships and how to submit competitive applications. Sophia, LaSharon, anything else from students while we have 3 minutes left?
Since we were talking about budgeting, it is coming in the spring term. We will be having a student panel of returning students who will talk about how they budgeted for their programs abroad. And so we're thinking bigger picture of not just like your tuition, your housing, your flight. What do you do for the fun stuff? Because oftentimes that's the part students forget, that once you get on the ground, what do you want to see and do? And so these students are also going to talk about how they were able to enjoy their programs abroad through their budgeting.
Thank you, LaSharon.
I don't have, I think we pretty much covered everything for financial aid. But like I said, as far as like the budgeting template or something of that nature for students, I am going to look into that. If it's not something that we have, then I will try to spearhead that and try to create something. But yes, you definitely have to have a safety net through savings of some sort. So, yep. And then, like I said, I am your buffer for those who are definitely afraid of financial aid. It's not as bad as it seems. It can be a lot of steps. But if you have somebody there to walk you through the steps, you'll come out successful. So feel free to reach out to me. Get in touch with me via email. If you need to set up an appointment, we can do that. And then we'll just take it from there to make sure you have a successful experience.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Everyone, give it up for Sophia. Yay.
Thank
We
you guys.
really
I
appreciate your
it.
support.
Of course, of course.